Welcome to The Staff Room, a podcast which takes a look into the world of education. In this series, we chat to inspirational educators far and wide about pedagogy, shed light on great practice, and discuss new and exciting ideas. My name is Michael Royale, and I'm sitting here with Tessa Johnson, and we're coming to you from Corpus Christi College in Perth, Australia.
In this episode, we'll be talking about podcasting as a creative and powerful medium for both teachers and students. We'll be chatting to fellow podcaster, author and Apple Distinguished Educator, Kelly Croy, who is the voice of the Wired Educator Podcast. Kelly joins us today to share his experience in creating podcasts and the impact they have had in education.
Podcasting distills content down to the essentials. It forces students to kind of analyze what they're saying, how they're saying it. They get opportunities to focus on the content, not the special effects. What are we actually going to talk about? Because you can't fake it with, sounds and things going on. You have to come up with something to say.
I'm Michael Royale.
And I'm Tessa Johnson.
And this is The Staff Room. So Tess, I'm really excited to hear from Kelly today, and we've actually listened to a couple of his interviews with our very own Director of Learning Technologies, Daniel Budd. So what are you looking forward to with today's interview?
Well, he's a great podcaster. We have listened to a couple of his podcasts, and today we're doing a podcast on podcasting.
Yeah.
Sort of like podcastception a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's obviously, I think he's up to his 113th episode of his podcast. And,
just a few more than us.
Just a stone throw a few more. So, he's obviously got a wealth of knowledge from 113 different guests.
Yeah.
So not only am I sort of looking forward to hearing his podcasting experience and comparing and certainly empathising as podcasters ourselves, but also he's surely got a lot to say and a lot that he's learned from all those guests he's
definitely.
had. How about you, Michael?
Well, I'm kind of looking forward to hearing what he has to say about, using podcasting as a tool in the classroom. So applying it to curriculum, not just English, but also other subjects as well. And, seeing how powerful a strategy or tool it can be.
I know the kids get quite excited about podcasts because there's obviously a lot of podcasts that they've probably listened to. I know the radio stations all have podcasts that go with them, and true crime podcasts, which I'm a little bit of a stickler for myself. So if we can get the kids excited, then I'm all for it. But anyway, let's get to the interview with Kelly.
Yep, can't wait.
Kelly Croy is the Director of Innovation and Instruction for Port Clinton City Schools in Ohio, a former English teacher, author of Along Came a Leader, and a world-renowned speaker. Now on its 113th episode, Kelly's groundbreaking show, the Wired Educator Podcast, explores professional development through interviews with expert educators from around the world. Kelly joins us via Skype today to talk about podcasting as a medium for professional development and its potential power with students in the classroom. So welcome, Kelly, and we're really, really excited to chat with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes. Well, thanks for having me on your show. I'm excited. Usually I'm sitting on the other side of the podcast interviewing guests, and it's just an honor for someone to be interested in my story. So I'm excited to share it. My name's Kelly Croy, and I have taught English at a middle school level for 26 years. And for the past 2 years, I accepted a new position in a neighboring district as the Director of Innovation and Instruction for Port Clinton City Schools. I've been hosting the Wired Educator Podcast for probably about 3 years, and I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator. I do a lot of things like a lot of educators do. I'm just really excited and really passionate about education itself, and I really want to make a difference in the lives of children and fellow educators.
What inspired you to create the Wired Educator Podcast?
Yeah, so I was attending an Apple Distinguished Educator Institute quite a few years ago, and there was a gentleman there who was just a really amazing, passionate educator. You've probably met someone just like him in your life, somebody who just when they entered a room, their presence just kind of changed the atmosphere of everybody in it. And this gentleman was named Chris Tolley, and Chris Tolley was an Apple Distinguished Educator, and he really focused on career tech. And I just loved to listen to him talk. And I liked listening to him talk so much, I decided one day to do a video chat with him. And at this time, the Wired Educator, I was just writing blog posts about, tools that educators could use. And I recorded it. I didn't even really know what to do with it. I shared it out as a blog post with people, and it was a video. And about a year later, I received news, that he had passed away rather tragically. And, when he was very young, it was an accident, and just really kind of impacted me. And I thought to myself, I'm so glad that I knew him. I felt so badly for his family. But at the same time, I was so happy that I was able to capture his story, his passion, his energy for education. And I kind of made a commitment right then and there that when I met interesting, energetic, passionate educators, that I would capture and archive their story and do my best to share it out with the world. And I really prefer audio over the video. I think it's you can multitask. It's a little more intimate. You can do other things while you're listening to a podcast. And I think podcasting is just a really great medium. And that's kind of my mission. That's how it all began. I really enjoy podcasting. I didn't know that I did. I never sought out to be a podcaster. It just kind of happened through that acquaintance.
So when you were deciding to create this podcast, did you listen to any other podcasts to sort of grasp some inspiration?
Yes and no. I did not listen to a lot of podcasts. I do now. At the time, I was really only listening to maybe one other or two other podcasts. One was Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income podcast. I like the whole idea of entrepreneurs. I love people who have one job and are, trying to do a side hustle and make a difference in other areas. And the other one was Tim Ferriss' podcast. Tim Ferriss kind of hacks life. He tries to get the essentials of life down into, making things manageable for everybody. And really, I look at those two podcasts, Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income and the Tim Ferriss podcast, and you look at both of those and really all podcasts just about. And what are they all doing? They're all teaching. They're all educators. They're all trying to teach people something. And I modeled a lot of what I do, my show, on those. And yet I put a lot of my own personality into it as well. Now I listen to all sorts of different podcasts. I really do kind of study them. I enjoy them. I learn from them. But I do kind of study and try to pick up ideas to put into my own show.
So you've already elaborated on it a little bit, but why do you think specifically for teachers podcasting is such a powerful medium?
Yeah, so podcasting is a powerful medium for everyone. I think especially so for teachers. There's a myth in education that there is a perfect way, that there is a perfect teacher, that there is a method for all. And I think sometimes when we look at book titles, maybe even blog posts, when we go to workshops or we hear people speak on stage or things like that, we feel like that's what's being sold to us. We feel like someone's trying to package a specific way to do something, the perfect way. This is how you do it. And educators shy away from that. We don't like that. But when you listen to a podcast, what are you doing? You're almost eavesdropping in on a conversation between two professionals, two highly trained professionals. And throughout most of the podcast, they're sharing the mistakes that they've made. They're sharing the way that they found success was through trial, failure, and then finally success. And so it really allows everybody to put their guard down. They just kind of feel like they're part of something. They're part of a conversation, not being talked to, but having a conversation with. And I think that's really appealing to teachers. Also, teachers are incredibly busy. They're parents, they're coaches, a lot of them have other jobs and things like that. And podcast lends itself well to driving the car. I don't recommend podcasting for every activity, but you can listen to a podcast while you walk your dog, do the laundry, drive the car, mow the lawn. And teachers really need professional learning opportunities while they can do other things as well.
Yeah, you're right. I know we've got a teacher here that listens to podcasts while he rides his bike on his long rides. So, yeah.
And it's great for a long run as well. So we've actually got a bit of a unit within our Year 8 class where they actually do a horror podcast, and that was done by one Jamie Clark. You might have heard of him. He's an Apple Distinguished Educator as well. But do you think podcasting does have a place in the classroom, and how can it be used as a teaching and learning tool?
Yes. I love it. I know Jamie. I am a big fan. Spoke with Jamie. Got some great ideas for my podcast, and we talked a little bit about doing a collaboration as well. Yes, podcasting is perfect for students just about of any age, and there's a lot of ways to go about it. I think video is great for the classroom as well, but here's a neat thing about podcasting. Okay, so when students do video, what do they focus a lot of their time and energy on? Special effects, how things look, and their worlds are very much image-centric, image-focused already. Podcasting distills content down to the essentials. It forces students to kind of analyze what they're saying, how they're saying it. They get opportunities to focus on the content, not the special effects. What are we actually going to talk about? Because you can't fake it with sounds and things going on. You have to come up with something to say. And not only do you have to have something to say, you have to create a presence about yourself and in your voice, your inflection, your tone, the pauses that you make, the way you pronounce words, the way you stumble from a mispronunciation. All of that really teaches the students so many things. So when they go on to write, when they go on to create videos, when they go on to do presentations in front of groups, and I could go on and on and on, they have learned so many vital skills from creating that podcast. And podcasting really lends itself to collaboration. It is hard for a person to create, write, publish a podcast on their own. I do it, but I wish I had a team of people. And it helps their writing. It helps their speaking. I think you can see the benefits from it. And I love the idea of doing fiction and drama and a horror story and all the other genres of literature on a podcast. That would also be very fun. And that's not an avenue that I've explored yet, but I would love to work with some students or teachers on that project.
Just out of curiosity, what are some podcasts that you've got your students to actually present before?
What types of podcasts?
Yes, yeah.
Sure. So at Port Clinton City School District, we have a teacher who is named Joe Miller, and he has a creative writing class, and he just created a podcast called The Novel Novelist. And The Novel Novelist is this writing class. Each student is going to write a novel this year, and they're documenting their journey, how they create characters, what they're focusing on each week, and they take turns. And so they're learning a lot about writing a novel while they're sharing it with the world. And I think they're even thinking about taking in questions and answering those as well. And the really cool thing about that is they're building their tribe or their audience now. So when they go to publish these novels digitally, they'll have people who will already be interested in it. And I think that's a really great way to do it. There's another Apple Distinguished Educator that contacted me recently. He's out in New York, and he wanted his student to work with me to create a podcast on the Anchor app. And this student is 17 years old. He has a voice like James Earl Jones. It's so deep. It's so great. This kid is going places. And he is just kind of sharing his thoughts and ideas about life at 17 and kind of documenting his journey and kind of looking at the world and sharing it with people and kind of getting real with it. So that's a lot of fun as well. Our 8th graders at Port Clinton City School District have a podcast called the We Are PC Podcast, and they use it to promote the great things that our district is doing and the people in it. And so we've only published 13 episodes, but they interview coaches and teachers and fellow students. The last episode, number 13, was high school students and middle school students and a student resource officer, which is a police officer in our building, and an administrator talking about social media. What a great conversation that would be. And so those are some avenues and ways we've explored podcasting at our school.
I like the way that it gives that real world relevance to the kids as well. And I remember in primary school you'd sort of write letters to the editor and sort of letters to members of the town council and things like that. But it's almost goes beyond that, doesn't it? It's for students to actually give their voice and project that voice to potentially a very, very large audience, yes.
It's wonderful. And even, from my age, to think that someone would want to interview me and hear my ideas, that flatters me. That makes me feel good about myself, and it makes me feel valued. Think about how students must feel to publish something like that and see that people are responding to what they're saying. It really gives that genuine audience, that genuine purpose, and really elevates them, gives them confidence in that area, which will transfer to all the other areas in their life.
Mm. Now, in one of your recent episodes, it's actually based on Everyone Can Create, so the Apple project. And can you explain what that's about to our audience?
Yes, the Everyone Can Create project by Apple is, I do love all things Apple, but it's probably one of my favorite initiatives that they started, because I am a big believer that creation is so much more important than consumption. People are naturally going to consume on their devices. It's just inherent. It's just the nature of the device itself. As educators, we need to teach people, students, adults, everyone, communities, parents, how to create and publish on their devices as well. And so Apple has published a series of resources to help teachers, help students create all sorts of things: music, publications, video. I love it. And I wanted to focus on an area of podcasting. And we kind of use the Everyone Can Create hashtag to promote this idea that creation is so much more important than consumption. Now, you're always going to have consumption, but if we can teach students to use their device equally for creation over consumption, just think of the great things that they're going to do. It's just going to be amazing. There's so many great free apps by Apple. iMovie, Pages. I love the new drawing features that Apple has with the Apple Pencil embedded in the software for the iPad. And it's just really challenging and encourage students to be creative and share their work. I believe that creation is this synthesization of learning, this depth of knowledge for this rigor and relevance, this quad D learning that we talk about in textbooks. That let's get to where the highest levels of learning is. Well, you can label it so many different ways. Let's just have fun with it and just call it creation, because that's what it is. I look back at my school. I remember my teachers primarily for two reasons. One, were they good to me? Were they kind, right? And second, what projects did we do? I imagine the same is true for you, right? You remember the things that you made, right? You remember the things that you do. And I think that's really, I don't want to get too much one device is more powerful than another. But when we look at using technology in the classroom, really, really, truly, the driving question should be, what can we make with this? What can students make with this device? And if you can answer that question in your classroom, then you have the right device.
What are some examples of the projects students have made with the Everyone Can Create, Apple project in your classroom?
Yeah, that's really hard to name an exact project or something like that. But let's just think about that a little bit. Let's talk about what it could be. I was in Chicago last March. I was in a school that had a creation studio. What a great name, right? A creation studio, not a classroom, an area for students just having freedom to create things that they want. That's what I think schools should be in general. And so imagine a student interested in music, collaborating with a student interested in writing, collaborating with a student who's interested in the spoken word. What things could they create? I just think projects like, you were talking about students doing a drama, a horror show on a podcast. Man, that is a great, great idea. I see schools creating movies and having their own kind of film festivals at the end of the year. Just great ways to collaborate with each other, with teachers, with their interests. We talk about personalized learning. I think you could write the word personalized learning on anything and sell it, to teachers, because that's kind of a hot buzzword. But what is personalized learning? It's identifying what students want to learn and matching it with the standards of what we feel are important in education. So I love it when I see students creating anything, really. I think students are making a lot of videos. They're doing that on their own time. They're using Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and things like that to create. We really need to bring that into the classroom, not necessarily those apps specifically, but by using the everyone can create resources, we can kind of recreate those feelings that they get from social media. There is a biological and neuro sensation in the human body by getting likes and hearts and comments on social media posts. Yes?
Definitely. Yeah, I can attest to that.
If as educators, if we can recapture that, give them opportunities to create, and they don't have to be big pieces either. They can be small chunks like that. And as a matter of fact, I think that is a driving to right now in education, that, books, I think we don't have to write 300-page stories. I think the society is kind of driving to these micro bursts of entertainment, and I think we can also do these micro bursts of learning and creation, and mix it up a little bit. But those are kind of my thoughts on that whole idea.
I love that idea of actually taking their vigor for something like Snapchat and transforming that into something really useful in the classroom. And I can definitely see the kids getting very, very excited about that. Yeah. So shifting back over to your podcast, in your time as a podcaster, which guest has inspired you the most?
Oh, that is also a hard question. That's like asking me which one of my daughters that I like the most. I enjoy everyone, and I don't want to sit on the fence on that, but I will point out a few special episodes. But I don't know. I think it's just the way that I'm made up. I'm always on the hunt. And so to me, the most exciting podcast for me is always the one that I'm trying to get. You know what I mean? I'm always I'm searching Twitter. I love to talk with people. I love to hear their stories, and I'm plotting, I'm planning, trying to figure out a way to get them onto the show. So probably the real answer is the next one. The next one, that's the one that is going to change the world for me. Some great podcasts that I've had in the past, fellow Apple Distinguished Educator Anthony Johnson. I don't know the show number, but look it up. That is a wonderful podcast because Anthony was a high school dropout. He dropped out of school, and his pretty much saw his life as being over. He begged his way into a college, which you can't do. It's impossible to do, but Anthony did it. And he became an educator, which you can't do, but he did, not having a high school degree. And then he became South Carolina's Teacher of the Year last year. And then that's over many, many, many years. But what a powerful story. And I was able to capture that and share it with the world. And it's not the fact that he was named Teacher of the Year. You look into his classroom, you look at his Facebook post. He doesn't sometimes post about his classroom. That's all he posts about. His life is education. He is a teacher. That is a really, really powerful podcast. I got to interview one of my podcast heroes, Pat Flynn. It didn't really have anything to do with education, yet it had everything to do with education. Pat Flynn is a master teacher, but doesn't have a teaching degree and doesn't really see himself as a teacher. But each and every day, he's creating podcasts to inspire people to live life and create and do these wonderful things. I could go on and on. Podcasting for me has opened so many doors. There are people who are now willing to talk to me that would never, have even given me time of day before I had a podcast. And that's not just good for me. That's good for my district. That's good for my fellow teachers. That's good for the students, right? Because the more we can connect the world with people who are doing things, the more everyone can do great things. And I really do believe that when one educator does something poorly, it negatively impacts and reflects on all educators. But when one educator does something special, wow, hold on a second, that makes all educators look great, and it really elevates our profession. And so, all I'm trying to do truly is just share the stories of great educators And I think in doing that, it raises all of education as a whole.
Yeah, fantastic answer. As well as that, I suppose, what's one of the most inspiring strategies or approaches or ideas that you've actually heard from one of your guests?
Wow, that is a really good question. It's different every time. I'll tell you, sometimes I get a big name in education and I'm like, ooh, I'll tell my wife, got a good one. I've got a great guest this week. And the interview's okay, and you're kind of like, wow, that wasn't really I expected. I was expecting this big splash and spotlights flashing in the air and fireworks going off and things like that. And sometimes I just interview a teacher from that hasn't published a book or been on stage or something like that, and they will share the most wonderful ideas with me. It's you just never know what a guest is going to share. But I will say this. Every guest that I've had on the podcast has really challenged my thinking. And that's what we want, right? The best teachers are teachers who are learning. And teachers who are listening to podcasts are learning. I've never had a guest come on. I'm like, oh, yeah, I do that. Oh, yeah, I'm all over that. Every single one has taught me so much. And I really just ask questions that I want to know the answers to. And so anything great that I've done in the classroom really have come across from things that I've read or ideas that I've collaborated with other people. Looking back at my shows, one of my favorite is April Required. She's an Apple Distinguished Educator. She created a group of students within her school that handles a lot of the computer needs of the teachers. They set up computers for presentations. They help students and teachers troubleshoot problems. That's awesome. Any way that we can use kids in real ways, I think is great. Another, great idea, Leah Lacrosse. She's in Huron, Ohio, just down the road from me. She's doing things with Sphero robots and computer programming in the classroom that really inspire me. I always check out to see what Leah's doing. But every single episode, there's something great for everybody, and I'm always learning.
All right. So Kelly, shifting the focus, we know you're a fan of Quickfire Questions on your podcast, so today we actually have a few for you. And the first is, what book are you currently reading?
Well, I read a lot of books. My wife doesn't even understand how I get so many books read, and I don't either. I think you just kind of have to, devote a certain percentage of your time. I have a car in my book. I have a car at work. I have a car, books.
Because are you loaded?
I keep a book everywhere I go is my point. I have a book next to my bed, and I got a book in my car, and my phone and my iPad and my computer all have books on them as well. One of the books I'm reading, and I read every single day of my life, is called The Daily Stoic. It's 366 meditations on wisdom, perseverance, and the art of living. And it comes from Stoic philosophy. And I don't pretend to be a Stoic philosopher, but I would like to live my life with greater intention and not care so much about what other people think and kind of distill my life down to the basic needs. That's one that I read every single day. I'm currently reading a book called Breathe. It's about breathing, and it is written by Ranch Belcia, and I have learned through this book that you can really change your state through how you breathe, and that there are actually many, many, many different ways to breathe. I know that sounds a little weird. I do read a lot of nonfiction. I just saw a book tonight that I want to get. It's by Abdul-Jabbar. He's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think you might know him. He's a famous NBA basketball player. I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. And he's written a book called Mycroft and Sherlock, which I'm really excited about. But one of my friends and favorite authors just sent me an advanced copy of his book called The Culture Solution. His name is Matthew Kelly. And all I've done is read the first page. I'm so excited to read that. I think it's so important that we create good cultures in our schools and in our workplaces and in our families and stuff. And I really think we can be intentional about it. But I could go on and on about the whole list of books that I like to read. I like to have a book that's entertaining. I also like to have a book that I'm learning with. Throughout the year, I always try to find a book to improve my life. Maybe it might be a cookbook. It might be a book about physical activity, how to get my body to level up a little bit more, how to level up as an educator, how to be a better father, things like that. So, yeah, I love to read. Those are some of the books I'm reading now.
Awesome. And what was your favorite book growing up?
I was a huge fan of Jules Verne. I loved all the, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Around the World in 80 Days was one of my favorite books. I loved adventure stories, still do. I love adventure movies. I'm still growing up, so I love the Harry Potter series. I think that's a great book. I just think it's so great for young readers today. There are just so many wonderful, wonderful books. I love I'm trying to think what it is, Lightning Thief series. It's all about Greek mythology if it were, happening right now.
Yeah, our kids love that series.
Yeah. I have 4 daughters, and they are all such great readers. I'm so proud of that. I still love to sit on the couch with them and read books. And I read a lot of juvenile literature. It's just it's so entertaining.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. So what advice would you give to new English teachers?
Advice to English teachers. Well, I think first and foremost, all teachers, and especially English teachers, you really need to get to know the students and just really work on building that rapport with your students. It may seem like you're wasting time, but you're not. Spend a little bit of time each and every day to, know the kids that you're teaching, learn about their hobbies, and try to incorporate those into the classroom as much as possible. I also think, in the English classroom, it's so much fun to write and create, but sometimes we spend our time in other places. Devote time each week, each day to writing and reading. Students at any age, even a high school age, really love and can benefit from being read to. And I know some people may scratch their heads to that, but take the time to read to your students at any age. I've had students come back and tell me that the voice they hear in their head when they read is mine. I always apologize when they tell me that, but I think those are some of the things we need to do. But sometimes, at least in the United States, we tend to not write as much as we should. And English teachers are also very guilty about grading everything. And I think students should write about 10 times more than what the teacher can grade. And so what I mean by that is just imagine if everything that you did in sports or school was constantly being measured and weighed and valued. That can kind of deter the purpose of what you want. Students need opportunities to practice freely without being measured. But we don't do that often with writing. Writing, they spent time on it. We feel like we have to mark it up and weigh it and hand it back to them. No, you don't. Just write a sentence or two on it. Write something, really positive, and then write something like, hey, here's something you might want to consider. And then, maybe 1 out of the 10 pieces they submit is a formal grading piece. Those are just my opinions, but I think that would go a long way. And don't undervalue other forms of writing, which include video and podcasting. That really is a type of writing.
Oh, excellent. Last quickfire question. What would be your must-have app for English teachers?
Must-have app for English teachers. Wow, that is a good one. Well, I love writing apps of all sorts of word processors and things like that. I do like Pages, Apple's Pages on the devices because it has the built-in teleprompter, and now you can draw in it. I think we need to look at writing as how it can expand into other interests. And so look at writing apps that you can include images and drawings and audio, embedding audio. So for that, I really like Pages. I also like Book Creator. I think every teacher should be using Pages or Book Creator to create digital books, publish their students' work. And I like the use of video. I really like the new Anchor app for podcasting. I can tell you a lot of different ways to create a podcast, but when it gets down to it, probably the simplest way for a classroom teacher to get started on podcasting is with Anchor and an iOS device. So those are some of my favorites. But, the best writing tool you have is the one that you have on you. And most students do have phones. And so if I were an English teacher, I would get my students to take out their phones and use notes, or there's so many other apps to journal and get their ideas down, and try to get them into that habit of capturing great ideas.
Look, finally, Kelly, can you let us know, or let our listeners know, where they can find the Wired Educator podcast, and also your recent book, Along Came a Leader, and where they can also find you online?
Sure. Probably the best way to communicate with me is, I love Twitter. I think Twitter is just one of the greatest resources for educators and leaders and just people in general. There's just so many great ideas out there. Yeah, there's people doing it wrong. There's people, insulting each other. But you can find me at Kelly Croy on Twitter or at Wired Educator. I use both. I flip back and forth between the two. I own the domain names for kellycroy.com and wirededucator.com. I would love for you to visit the sites and, to see the things that I write and share about. You can email me at kelly@kellycroy.com or kelly@wirededucator.com. I respond to every email. Sometimes it takes longer than others, but I love to hear from people. Sometimes people just write to me and they want to start a podcast, and I have some resources that I can send them. Those are the best ways probably to get a hold of me. And Along Came a Leader is on. It's a book about leadership for students, for teachers, for administrators, for parents, and you can grab that on Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly, for talking to us. Very, very inspirational, particularly you, I guess, and your thirst for learning and being challenged. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly. The enthusiasm is palpable. It's fantastic to hear.
Wonderful. The honor was mine. Thank you very much.
And I wouldn't feel too bad for that kid that has your voice in his head when he reads. You've got a lovely speaking voice. Yeah.
And you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Have a good night.
So Tess, we've just interviewed Kelly, and he had some amazing things to say about podcasting and teaching in general. What are some takeaways that you took from this?
I think the thing that I was most impressed with was when Kelly gave some examples of how students are podcasting within the classroom, getting their creative writing out there and then putting that into podcast form and then presenting that to the world and collaborating with different students from different schools. And I just think that is really, really cool, because I know in university we say, to make learning stick, you've got to give it real world relevance. And a lot of the time you'll be teaching essay structure and the kids will say, what relevance does this have to the real world? If you can put something into a podcast and use it as a communication device, I think that is a really, really nice sort of entry into that level of understanding. And yeah, I think Kelly really summarised that quite well in sort of listing off all those examples of amazing ways that kids are using podcasting.
Yeah, definitely.
What was your main takeaway, Michael?
Well, I like the idea that he actually talked about it, and we are aware of it after having listened to some of his episodes in his podcast, that he's essentially just documenting different teachers' journeys or approaches to actually learning and, getting to where they are today. So it's quite an impressive tool in that as well, because, that's something that I think we don't just take for granted, except I suppose we don't really even know anything about. And there's so many amazing stories out there, so many amazing teachers, except largely unheralded. So
yeah, because often we wouldn't have time to just go up to, the maths teacher at the class that's been teaching at the school for 30 odd years and say, what's your story?
Yeah.
So I do like that idea as well of not necessarily always trying to go for the most famous podcast interviewee, but just, someone who's got a story to share.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a cool concept.
Thanks so much for listening to The Staff Room, and thanks to our guest, the awesome Kelly Croy. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, my handle is @Michael_Royale, and Tessa's is @Tessa_Johnson too.
Please make sure you subscribe to our podcast on either iTunes or Stitcher, and feel free to leave a review and give us any feedback on the show. Listen out for our next episode of The Staff Room, which will be available shortly.
I'm Michael Royale.
And I'm Tessa Johnson.
Thanks for listening.